Hey, welcome to the PlaceOS AI Guys podcast. I'm here with Steve, who is a bit sick today.
G'day all. Well, post-viral,
Yeah.
husky voice.
Today we're going to talk about some announcements, a couple of PlaceOS announcements, then we'll talk about some AI announcements, and then have the real sort of focus of this episode. PlaceOS, just a general announcement, we're about to release our first native mobile app. And the reason for that is to access mobile features, right? So we are a strong believer in the accessibility of the web. So don't think that this is us going against our own messaging. It's more for seamless workflows when it comes to access control and saving credentials on your phone or your wallet to interact with the NFC and Bluetooth or other native device features. So that's when you should use an app. So that will be part of our workplace package coming out soon. So we'll make more announcements about that. But let's jump into AI. What's big news at the moment in AI?
So the most recent event's probably that Apple Intelligence event.
I actually don't mind the Apple branding of Apple Intelligence. The in a way, artificial intelligence seems a bit dated, and to sort of make it their own makes sense.
Yeah.
It would be weird to say Apple Artificial Intelligence.
Yeah. And it's pretty funny how they effectively did Microsoft Recall.
Yeah.
But their branding means no one's outraged by it.
Yeah, because they're not comparing it to these like the remote worker monitoring software that people are used to on Windows, or it's not an extension of that. There are some misconceptions about their announcements. Like I've seen a lot of people think it's just like powered by ChatGPT. There's certainly integration, and there's a deal there we can talk about. But they have their own models that they're running and doing so much on the local device using their own processing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's exciting, the ability to run Apple Intelligence locally without it having to go off to ChatGPT. I think it's only when it needs like real world knowledge or
we just can't work something out. So what's interesting is Siri traditionally went to the cloud.
Yeah.
The bad Siri.
Yeah.
And now this new, much better Siri runs totally locally.
I wonder what their meetings were like if they, I can imagine they had lots of meetings like, should we keep the Siri branding or scrap it and call it something completely new? Because we are constantly saying, it's not like Siri, when I'm giving examples to people about what large language models with multimodal is going to enable, I say, don't think of Siri. Don't think of Google Assistant in their current form. Because, we're so jaded. But at the time, it was innovative, right? Like, how old is Siri? 10 years?
Probably older.
Yeah.
But it's not even... Yeah, I mean, the fact that it still sort of worked, like Apple constantly polished it. It never quite met anyone's ideal vision of what Siri could be.
Yeah.
But it was never bad, which is why I think they've kept the branding.
I actually saw Woz talk about it on a podcast, post announcements for Apple Intelligence, and he was saying, I'm now just an Apple user. I don't have anything to do with the company.
Yeah.
And the vision of Siri is finally going to be realized if we can believe these demos. He's very skeptical, and in a way, he's like, I'll judge it once I use it myself. But the demos look promising. Where when the original ad campaigns for Siri was exactly what we're expecting in the new version of Siri, which is like, it telling us, truly being an assistant, like, oh, it's your anniversary today, you better get some flowers, here's some flower options, like all of that sort of stuff that it doesn't have that, ability to cross-reference or have more context.
Because now I can see what's on your screen.
We're saying Siri way too much that my phone just thinks I'm talking to it.
I kept mine with the hey in front.
Yeah.
Because they got rid of that, but then I was like, I'm always referencing it.
Yeah. That's I think that's going to happen a lot as we talk about Siri and people are listening on their own device. But I guess at the root of this is a couple of things, like the ability to run locally. So it's no longer going out to the cloud. So the response should be like instant, and then extending into ChatGPT when it needs to. So it makes that decision when to use ChatGPT to connect to other things, but it's still useful with its own Apple Intelligence, its own secret source that's not OpenAI.
Yeah.
I think that's what people are missing in some of these announcements.
And also the way that they have their cloud running, so their AI cloud that's private to Apple runs in an end-to-end encrypted method.
Yeah.
So even Apple can't look at the inputs that went into those AI models or the outputs. So it's very privacy first focus.
Yeah.
Whereas ChatGPT can technically record everything that you asked it and how it answered, and that all gets used for training and things.
Yeah.
Not with Apple's. Apple said, well, if we're going to use you, then we don't want you to do that. So they're not allowed to save that data for Apple users, but typically,
which is part of people's negative feedback. I've seen that misconception that OpenAI is at this operating system level, where Apple Intelligence is, but OpenAI isn't.
Yeah.
The architecture of it isn't as straightforward as just running ChatGPT on every app.
Yeah.
But interestingly, another part of Apple Intelligence is the potential for app developers like PlaceOS. And I just on the top of the show mentioned we have a native app coming out on iOS. Part of the reason is to access API functions or native functions of the operating system. And in the near future, that will be Apple Intelligence. So it can be something that Siri can interact with. So some of the functions within our application can be accessed via Siri, but also that will allow Siri to cross-reference other things you have on your phone. So you can imagine like your calendar app referencing some data and Apple Maps knowing the trip data, and then that can look at data that's in PlaceOS and link all these things together.
Yeah. So a lot like sort of Microsoft's Copilot.
Yeah.
On the upcoming version of Windows, at least.
Yeah. So this ability to choose to not use an app. It's an interesting concept when you think about us deploying a native app so you don't have to use it.
Yeah.
So you can use Siri rather than the native app.
Yeah, it's more for the authentication and the access pathway.
And even just like keep your phone in your pocket, it gives us that access control integration. It gives us all these features, but you're not necessarily going to a button, opening, searching through forms, and it's the sort of landscape and the ecosystem is evolving. That we don't have to have 6 taps to find and book a desk and find where Steve's working today, and then order a coffee for both of us, and book the podcast studio, like all these things that are
the complicated things that people have to learn that would probably differ between every organization. Yeah, that no one wants to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
And now you can just ask Siri.
And by making everything like common, we always talk about normalizing data, but even normalizing user experience means everything's more fluid and transferable. Like in our industry, we have a lot of mixed-use buildings. Yeah. So a building that's both a residential tower, a few floors of co-working, a hotel across
public
the building.
Public parking on the weekend.
Yeah, Virgin Active Gym, and like all these like the building has to be many things, but the user experience stops and starts at each of those sort of islands of technology, where normalizing in this way could break down these silos more effectively. And of course, by using PlaceOS to integrate with everything, so it allows these models to interface. So any other AI news in general?
I mean, we're working on AI assistants.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like in-room control and concierge via voice. So we're on a pathway to have that nice and polished in the next few months.
Yeah, that we've got a milestone that we'll announce in the near future. But what I like about this, back to my original message, that we love web. We love web first where possible. We have a partnership with Google Chrome, the enterprise team at Google. And to run as much of this in the web as possible is another focus of ours, because any of our existing clients, they could just, through their existing endpoints, have these AI assistants. So where we might have customers using visitor kiosks that are interfaces powered by PlaceOS, or people searching kiosks on a work floor.
Even the room booking panels or meeting room control panels. Yeah. Because they often are multi-use, like the actual hardware. They already have cameras and microphones in them.
we're not leveraging them in most cases.
Yeah.
So now that you're getting return on investment on your existing hardware, because it happens to be AI ready. Because if you have 100 PlaceOS room booking panels across your organization, those are usually third-party hardware like AOpen or maybe just an iPad. Now we can access those native features. So voice input, camera input, which could be used for something as simple as self-check-in, but more advances like context to know who's using the panel, to then respond to that person based on who they are, or multiple people, or any situation we can think of.
Or even just knowing the rooms in use. We have all the context around why the room was booked, like the actual event. Does that event have a VC link in it?
Yeah.
And the AI can take all that information and then be like, okay, now there's someone in the room, I'll set it up, or ask, would you like me to set up the room when it detects you walk in?
Yeah.
And then you can say, yes, please set up the room, or no, wait for a few other people.
So many things we could add to this. Like if there's a view of the room in a way that it can see your presentation, it could also know that it's not working and set it up for you, or log a fault automatically. I like the meeting room as a starting point to get people's head around the large language models and multimodal being an interface, because it's a controlled environment with lots of integrations. So a really good starting point. And these kiosks or room booking panels are now discovery points, or just endpoints for the AI to see and hear you before we expand it to be a bit more invisible, or in combination. It could be a discovery point.
And it has context. I mean, it might not need to be invisible. Like a room booking panel might just be indicating for the casual walker buyer that the room's busy or about to be busy.
Yeah.
But then that can also have an AI interface. So you could say, could you book the room for me in 10 minutes?
But what I mean by invisible is we could just have microphones and audio systems that can take your commands from anywhere, but you won't know that they're there. These kiosk or panels are these discovery points that you realize is something to talk to, right? A focal point. So like an analogy, not an analogy, a walkthrough I like to go through to sort of explain the possibilities of this related to PlaceOS is the actual discrete control of devices and how that could interact with like an AI interface. So with a meeting room, let's say we have a Samsung display on the wall and it's connected to PlaceOS. We have a PlaceOS module that will match to that make model of Samsung display. So Samsung module. Within that module, we match it to every function that's available on that TV. So there might be 10 functions in that module. The user interface, the traditional user interface, which is like a panel or an app on your phone, will have buttons to control those functions, but you have to sort of choose what buttons of matching what functions. So if you're just turning the TV on and off, there will be on-off, which is one function, a power state, but the 9 other functions are not available to that user interface. The difference with AI is that it can use the 10 functions when it needs to, essentially in situ, based on the requests of the user. So it allows us to do things that the user interface just can't do unless someone changes the user interface.
Or you wouldn't want to do because you want to have a simple user interface.
Exactly.
Like I just want to show my laptop. 99% of people want to do that. But then one person has a vision impairment and can't see the contrast.
Exactly.
So then they can just ask AI, hey, could you increase the contrast? I can't really see the screen.
Yeah, you could even say, look, I'm vision impaired. Can you put it into higher contrast mode? Or, or you could start cross-referencing other integrations. The AI model can. The AI interface can. So if, let's say, the sun's shining on the TV, so again, I'll say, hey, I can't really see the image very well. The sun's shining on it. So it will say, well, I've increased the brightness to 100%. But I can also see I've got access to blind control. So I'm going to go ahead and close the blinds. And so I can start to just do things that don't have to be hard programmed into interface, which that's the thing I want people to get their head around. Because when you're designing solutions now for spaces, it is all about making sure all of the possible functions and the integrations are in the system so that AI can have the desired user experience as needed in real time, which is a new way of designing space. It's not doing mock-ups of interfaces to match 20 user stories that the client's given you, and by the time the project has actually completed, there's 20 more user stories that haven't been collected yet, and so no one's happy with anything because like it's not evolving fast enough. We're moving from that to say everything's connected. We can do everything of every API that we're connected to. So like it's all now about that natural language and letting the AI have access to that in a secure and private way. So that a good starting point is that step one, connecting everything. Step two, having these discoverable hardware elements that have camera input and voice input, as well as visual representation. So information displays that can do more than just book a room, can be the response to your AI requests. I mean that's the main topic of today. We'll let you recover your voice. We probably will skip an episode because I'm having a baby next week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Baby number 2. So I'll be at the hospital when we usually record our podcast, and then we'll play it by ear from then.
Sounds good.
And I'm sure within that break there'll be a lot more AI news to catch up on.
Yeah, definitely.